Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Ace on Music. I'm your host, Ace Trump. I'm joined as always by my producer, Mark. And this week we're going to have part two of a two-part series that we have where I have my friends Seth Berg and Adam Parsons join us in a conversation talking about these companies that are acquiring huge music catalogs and that sort of thing. So without further ado, here is part two of that session. So we've been focusing our conversations obviously on heritage acts and well-known acts because obviously the amounts of money in the game are headline making. But how do you feel that this sort of I mean this is not a new trend. We see all kinds of things happen throughout the music business. You know, a few years ago we saw the advent of the 360 deals and where that went. This is not a new thing, but suddenly it's getting a lot of headlines because of the dollars involved. But how do you think that this is affecting emerging artists or art, current artists in this day and age? You take that one, Adam.
Again, I think it's just an option for them. The problem is that, from what I'm aware of, with the Round Hills and the Hypnosis sort of deals, they're really they want to buy catalog which has got some sort of heritage to it, whether it's old or newer. It's got some sort of that some background to it, if you like. Trying if you're a new songwriter and you're coming up. I'm not saying that you obviously need to have a song placed with a Taylor Swift, placed with an artist that is going to get it. Like when Diane Warren first came up, and she had her first song place, and then all of a sudden that did really well, and all of a sudden she was the go-to girl for like that sort of material. And I think you've got to prove yourself in this business to get the big bucks. I wouldn't advise any new songwriter right now without a pedigree to take a 20 grand offer for the rest of their, if they've written a bunch of stuff, because I don't think it's worth it. But you've got to have a bit of backup there to be able to get the big bucks. So, but again, it's just an option. I don't, nobody's putting a gun to anybody's head, are they? It's just something else that's in the industry, which the offer's there. You have the option to take it or the option to leave it. I don't think that's a bad thing.
How about you, Seth? What do you think about that? How is this sort of thing going to affect emerging artists?
Yeah, I think there's still an outlet for emerging artists. I would, I mean, I agree with Adam. I wouldn't go and sell anything off. I think I would try to find a traditional music publisher or label and, work it out as an advance so you've got some money. But to give anything away, I think at that stage in your career is just not worth it.
Interesting, interesting. So obviously, if a company like Hypnosis is spending literally billions of dollars acquiring this stuff, they have to put a structure in place in order to exploit what they've now acquired. I personally haven't found much about that. Do either of you know anything about how they're going about, getting their money back for their investors?
Personally, I don't, but I'm sure with Merck's background and Niall and everybody else that's not on the front line of the media that they've got. I'm sure it's just not those two in an office with a woman that answers the phone. That they've got that covered. But I don't personally know how they're going about it. But I'm sure they're not. As it's a publicly traded company, they've got a lot of people to answer to that have invested. So I'm sure they've got their proverbial shit together, if you know what I'm saying.
How
Yeah,
about you,
it's
Seth? What do you think?
Cobalt. Yeah, yeah, Cobalt is administering for them,
Oh, is
and
it?
they
Okay,
just
okay.
sold some catalogs. Yeah, Cobalt's got the infrastructure. They've been doing this obviously a long time, and they are. I think they just sold some catalogs to Hypnosis too, but they're doing the administration, which I'm sure will lead to a full purchase of Cobalt at some point, because Cobalt revolutionized the industry. A lot of people thought they were going to fail, but what they've offered to artists is pretty amazing at a time when it was really risky to do it.
Well,
We
for
we have
the
artists
masses,
with Cobalt, so we know them
no,
well.
please go ahead.
No, I'm saying we have artists with Cobalt, so we know them well.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, we are familiar with Cobalt, but I think our general listening audience might not be. Seth, can you tell us a little bit what Cobalt is and what they do and why they would be acquired by Hipgnosis?
yeah, I guess you could probably call them a rights management company. I hate to refer to them as a publisher, although that's where they started. But the idea originally, if my memory serves, was that they were going to offer, and I think it might have been and originally it might have been admin deals, that they would be basically they would pay you every single month as opposed to having to wait for a normal royalty period to accrue. And they put together very early on, very transparent um, internet access for the talent to be able to see what money was coming in, what money was in their account, where it was coming from. And a lot of the industry followed suit with that because people really left their traditional record labels and publishing companies to go to Cobalt just to have that transparency. If just to save money on audits, audits are not cheap to conduct. They can cost a lot of time and money and animosity. So if you can see real time accruing of your in your account, it does save a little bit of that aggravation. And over the years, they started to buy catalogs and bring in more and more people. So they've really, I think they really, were an industry a trendsetter.
Now, Mark, you being our resident music lawyer here, I wanted to know if you've looked at these deals at all, or if you've read the media on this, and what your take is from a legal point of view on this.
Well, thanks, Ace. I will say that I'm not as optimistic when it comes to the smaller artist here. I'm not sure exactly why Dylan would do this, given who a lot of us thought he was. I mean, he kind of, we wanted him to be bigger than everything else, but really we understand it's a commercial business. But I'll tell you, I think that this really gets down to this idea of the bundling of rights. And I don't think that's good for younger artists that don't have value in their catalogs,
Mm-hmm.
because the more properties that are owned by these companies, these organizations, and the greater deals they strike, you tend to see that when they strike those deals, the broadcasting outlets, the distributors, use those songs, and they're able to get them for bulk discounts, and they're able to favor those particular catalogs. And people who are not on those catalogs are excluded. And you saw that dating back several years ago with the Starbucks collections, where instead of going out through traditional means, they would go out and bundle those artists together, where they were able to get them for discounted rates. And if you were not on that list, you were essentially excluded from that. And I think that that may be the direction, which could cause a devaluation, especially for those younger artists. That's really my biggest concern here.
What do you think about that, Seth?
We're an industry that always thinks the sky is falling, and it's increased more and more and more. I mean, the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, I was getting phone calls about how we're all finished, and a lot of people did very well. If you're a touring artist, you might not have, but certainly streaming has become the prolific way now to get music globally, where we were still having a pretty robust physical business, for example, with my clients in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the rest of the world, and streaming was it wasn't being as accepted. Now, no one had a choice. So I think that it will survive. They thought that this was the end of the music business when everybody got drafted into World War II and they had to play old records and DJs came around. Then they thought it was the end of the music business when Elvis shook his hips on the Ed Sullivan Show. And when the Beatles came in and became the singer-songwriter, they thought, publishing will never recover from this. And then, the destruction of AM radio to FM, they thought that was the end, and CDs, and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. We just are adaptable, and we have to adapt to this. And, but I agree with everybody else. I just don't think that this is that this avenue in these types of acquisitions is good for a young artist with no value, because you could make it someday. You could have a smash hit that you're then making somebody's purchase much more valuable, and you don't participate in that. Take the ride with your own talent.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. This is not about the sky is falling globally. This is about whether an artist has a chance to get into a Netflix production, an Amazon production, a Disney production. Well, Disney may be a little bit different, but I mean, not having, yeah, I mean, we all know. But when it comes to those avenues, the ability for an independent artist to get onto Grey's Anatomy, and then, next thing you know, it's everything. Those are the rights, those are the opportunities that I'm worried about. There will always be an opportunity, but the ability to fit into a, a, a collection of bundled copyrights and rights that have already been assembled and may be the exclusive provider for that particular distribution outlet is exclusionary. And it's just something that is a change. And I'm not, it may be welcome for people who are in that category, in that catalog, but it may not be ideal for everybody else.
Something that you and I have talked about a few times before privately, Mark, is just could be at the root, obviously, about why we're seeing the explosion of these kind of deals. I mean, in today's world, it is all about the streaming services. Is all, and I don't mean streaming services as far as music, and not talking about Spotify and stuff. I'm talking about Netflix and Amazon and things like that. There's an incredible amount of shows being made, and every show needs a soundtrack. So there is tremendous opportunities there for it. Seth, or Adam, excuse me, do you think that that is at play a lot with what's going on right now?
Music's been around for generations. It's been around since the Roman times. It's been around the Middle Ages, the courtiers in the 13th, 14th, 15th century. We're just it just changes with it's only in the last 10 years that we've really had streaming hit, and the physical market has kind of gone out. It's going to be physical product for the rest of eternity. It's just going to be called a novelty item, a merchandise. During this pandemic, the merch companies that I've spoken to have never had it so good. Including touring. I mean, the online sales has been absolutely amazing. I just think we've just going back to the previous question, really, just to sort of put my input on it. I think we're just looking at a different generation coming up. Again, I don't think that the new artists have the catalogue to and also they actually have the lifetime. There's going to be music forever. There's going to be music required for stuff that we don't even know is even invented yet. It's the one thing that the movie industry started in the 30s, 40s. Well, the silence started in the 20s, but it's still relatively new. But music has been around for centuries. Many hundreds of years, and it's still going to continue. How we exploit that is something that I'm going to be long gone before I know what the next generation's doing. I'm just looking at it now. So I would say to anybody, it's like, learn from my mistakes. Invest your money when you're young, not when you're old. So hold on to your copyrights, hold on to your master rights, hold on to your intellectual properties and everything that like you own or like you're going to acquire. Because unless you really need that money, and going back to what I said earlier, Ace, we've had artists that have sold publishing for pennies on the dollar. They would have made 20, 30 fold if they'd have just kept onto it. But we needed to buy some
Not
drugs.
under our advice, I'd like to add.
Oh no. This is the thing. The reasons they sold it were just ridiculous when they look at they weren't thinking of the big picture. So looking at younger artists and where it's going to go, I don't know. Right now we're at a crossroads. If I knew where we were going to be in 30 years, I would be a billionaire now. But I don't, I mean, nobody, that we're at that, and especially with the way the world is now. The good thing is, thank God we've got streaming, so we're all entertained when we're sitting at home, because if we had to rely on going out to buy music from record stores or going to the cinema to see movies, which was what we did 30 years ago, and we had a pandemic like we got now, we'd all be screwed. So it's kind of like, and I'm sure things will, move on. I just think, I've got no real definitive answer. Just my view is just hold on to, if you're a new artist, hold on to what you're creating, because this doesn't really going, the whole acquisition of rights, unless you've got rights, which is worth something, then why sell them? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. What do you think, Seth?
Yeah, I think synchronization plays a huge part in the analysis of what they're going to pay for a catalog. I think that's what you were asking, right? Does
Yes.
synchronization sort of play a part? Yeah, I mean, and it's probably, between YouTube and the syncs, the two places where my artists get discovered the most. We had Fever, Peggy Lee's Fever was in a pretty big scene in The Queen's Gambit, the chess,
Yes.
phenomenon on Netflix. And our streamings went through the roof. I mean, we were mentioned in articles, we were shared globally, and it was an very, very important use for us. And they paid us for it. They paid us for the privilege to allow them to promote our music. And we were very quick to jump on that. So it was also the benefit that we had control and could do that. Imagine if we had sold that right to somebody else who just didn't necessarily care or jump on that quickly enough, where they could have increased the income or increased the exposure. So I
I mean,
think the syncs are incredibly important.
I'm sorry, Adam and I, we had one of our artists experience a variation on what you just talked about. We had one of our artists, we well, not only licensed a song, but also had the artist perform in a commercial for an insurance company here in America. So, do you want to talk about that one, Adam?
Yeah, it was, obviously it's we're talking about the Final Countdown by Europe, and it's a classic song that everybody wants, and it's been used in lots of advertising around the world. It was used in political campaigns. I hasten to add, not with our
Consent.
consent or approval, but yeah, it's they, because advertisers, I mean, most advertisers, most movies with big budgets, they want songs that are recognized. It's very difficult to get a new song in a big blockbuster movie, or in a big ad campaign, because ultimately the is familiar to people. I remember I had a meeting with Cobalt, with one of my artists, a couple of years ago, where we had a song that would be perfect for a FedEx or Amazon type company, and we actually, the artist in question actually literally went into the office, and we actually put our song to the advert that like they had out, and it worked perfectly. As it is, the particular company used a classic Motown song, or a classic 70s disco song. Actually, it was later Motown era, but to actually sell that product, and I totally get it. It's like, up until a few years ago, when I wanted to buy a new record, I would always go for the greatest hits of things that I was a bit lazy. Now I'm trying to discover new music through the streaming services and everything. But yeah, I just going back to what everybody's saying about the, about holding on to rights. Look at Guitar Hero and Rock Band, and look how it made money for bands like Mountain and Foghat and things like this. And and a prime example was my nephew. I was walking past his room when I was visiting my brother a year or so ago, and he's playing the Ink Spots, which is a 1940s band. and it's literally sounded like he turned his room back into the Second World War era, because this very archaic 1940s music was coming out, and I happened to know the song. And I happen to know it was the Ink Spots, which I won't go into, but I happen to know it was.
Fallout
And I said, why
video game.
And it was
Fallout video game.
absolutely. That's
Yeah, it was the
exactly
Fallout.
where he
Yeah.
where he got it. And
Yep.
so he picks up music. Of course, the streaming. He spends all his time. I just mentioned this. The same kid. His name's Sam. My brother said, "Watch this," and he actually got his phone and he played about 50 or 60 songs, the first 2 or 3 seconds of these songs. And Sam guessed every single one. It was anything from Johnny Cash to Squeeze to Iron Maiden to the Stranglers to the Beatles to the Rolling Stones. And I was just absolutely amazed at how this kid knew. And it's songs that I would go, I know that song, God, just give me 10 seconds. And he'd already got it, And I said, how do you know this? He spends all his time on YouTube. He literally comes in, and of course, YouTube recommend, the same as Spotify have their recommended playlist for things that you like. And it's a great way of getting stuff out there, So I totally, there's a lot to be said for holding on to your copyright. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying sell everything you've got for whatever's on offer. I'm just saying we're at the end of that generation where maybe to a lot of artists, they are looking at the future. They know they're not around too much longer. We're having people die off every day. You hear some famous star has passed away, and they're just looking at the future and they're going, what can we do with this money now compared to my son, daughter, grandson, whatever, trying to administer it when we have no idea where the business is going to take us. Is Bob in 20, 30 years' time? Who knows? I certainly hope so, but who knows really? All these artists, are we going to get to 100 years' time? Well, I mean, there's also there's the 70-year copyright law that is now coming to fruition with, to the end of its term with a lot of artists. When it first started, where a master recording becomes copyright free after 70 years. Now, we never had that problem 30, 40 years ago, but now we're getting to the point where some of these are coming to their 70 years, and I've heard that they were going to lengthen 100 years or whatever, but I'm not sure exactly what happened with that. But so it's like,
out of curiosity, Seth was saying how much the song "Fever" in the Queen's Gambit affected the streaming. Did Europe see a similar boost?
Yeah, of course. Yes, anything like that. It just reminds people of what they liked 30 years ago, and they go and stream it. Of course, yeah. We absolutely saw an upsurge in streams and even sales on that record at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, and you never know,
Seth?
because sometimes it doesn't hit, sometimes it does hit. That's why you just
Yeah.
you got to sort of do everything. I like to use the example, if you want, I don't know if you're familiar with the artist Audra May, but before she sort of broke out into the bigger indie world, I guess, she was a local LA artist, and she got picked up by a music supervisor to record an a cappella version of Forever Young, and I think it was in Sons of Anarchy. And she really had no label infrastructure. They weren't prepared for how the impact that it was going to have, and it wasn't available. If you Shazammed it, it didn't bring you anywhere. You would Google it and say, what was that song? Who was that artist? And everybody was trying to find her and who this was. And it took them 6 months to get that up and out there. So if you're in a company that is only buying catalogs, they might not be prepared. I mean, it's hard enough with a regular traditional record label and a publishing company to try to stay on, turn on a dime, let alone somebody that's that doesn't have that infrastructure to do that for you.
Adam, any last words you'd like to say on the subject before we call it a day?
I just think I think what Murky's doing and what all the labels are doing is they're offering a service which right now to a lot of artists is extremely to them. And but as I say, like anything, it's not right for everybody. You know, everybody's got an opinion on it. I personally think it's a good thing. I wouldn't advise, going back to what we are saying, just to recap, I wouldn't advise younger sell what they have now cheap and until they've because nobody knows what the future holds. But for artists that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and the end of their sort of term, if you like, it's a great option to get some big money now, and obviously in their lifetime, invest it for their future generations that are going to be dependent on it. So I think it's a great thing, personally.
How about you, Seth? Any final words?
Yes, I'm available to be purchased for $200 million. And I'll invest all the money in GameStop.
How about you, Mark? You have anything left to say on this front?
I don't know how to follow that. I've tried to purchase Seth, but he's, no, where I think this is a get paid to play, and we'll obviously see how it goes. But these buckets, I mean, they're real, and it's a game about sync, and that's the new content here, and we'll see how it goes. And standing for principles still matters. Dylan, U2, Springsteen. I mean, I want them to be bigger than this, and it kind of makes my heart feel funny when I see deals like this in the news.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for helping me demystify some of these headlines for everybody. I really want to thank Seth Berg, as always, one of our favorite guests on the show. Thank you for helping us out. And to my business partner, Adam, glad you finally made it to the show, and we'll see you on many more in the future.
Thank you.
In the meantime, thank you. So in the meantime, I want to thank all of you for continuing to tune in. Remember, you can always send feedback to acetalksmusic@gmail.com. We love to hear your feedback, your questions, ideas for shows. We're here to listen. We also have the patreon.com platform for the Ace on Music show over there. And we host our after hours show there, where you can only get it if you're a Patreon member. In the meantime, everybody take care of yourself, and we'll see you next time.